welcome back around the bonfire. It's the show that will be sending you, yes you, the humble listener, to Scotland. I hope you enjoy it while you're there. It's Tim and John back, another episode of the bonfire. Tim, we don't always get breaking news because we record on Sunday nights. We are recording this ostensibly day of release, and the news just came down. I'll ask before we go, good day, bad day, medium day?
I mean, look, it's certainly a day. The Leagues Cup bearing down, I think it's a short week for everybody. And the news about cups is kind of like icing on the cake on top of all of that. I reading the tea leaves, you don't have to be a genius to think that the Fire are signing a center back, and you don't have to be a genius to think it's probably going to be a move from within the league. There not being a ton of other domestic options, and this probably not being something you want to get it.
And let's not bury the lead any further. Christopher Cupp's going on loan to Scottish club Greenock Morton through the end of 2026. They are a Scottish championship side, so it's the second division of Scotland. They are a team that has lost. Shout out to our friend Alex Campbell from CHGO for pointing this out. They've lost their last 12 competitive matches. Tim, I don't know how long you want to spend on this. I was a little bit floored when this came across the wire, and I think there's a lot of moving pieces, I think, to a move like this that does not open a roster slot, by the way.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big questions. Now, the other side of that is that as long as the Fire have a slot available, they've reserved the right to recall Cups at any point in time. So it doesn't really close that down as an option. Cups has not been getting minutes in 2026. Like, he had a promising start in 2025. Like, getting minutes is like literally a child. With a body of a grown adult. But anyone that age that is getting into basically a situation where it's trial by fire, like literally in more ways than one, of getting thrown in after in the middle of a game, and he made it work. And I think that was impressive. This year, he's had 42 minutes in league play. Like, he really hasn't played a lot of minutes. He did not get any minutes in the Leagues Cup. He did not get any minutes in the Open Cup. He's been playing for Fire too. So, say what you want about the level of the second division in Scotland, it is going to be a more competitive level than MLS Next Pro. And it just is going to be a different environment, right? It's going to be a radically different environment. And something I think we've seen from a lot of guys that come up through academies is that they have all of the comforts of home all around them, and that can be great. But if sometimes that can stall your development and make you almost have too much of a comfort blanket. And I don't know if that was part of the background behind the moves here. I haven't had a chance to talk to people around the team about it, but that could be, I think, one of the things that this makes, it tries. Like, how do you do in a different culture, different environment? How do you do in a place that doesn't have MLS level facilities, and can you sink or swim?
Does it feel like throwing the baby out with the bathwater a little bit? And that's not the right term to use. Cutting off your nose to spite your face, maybe, where it's like, I agree with the things you're saying. They make sense. I think most fans would be like, yeah, he's not playing. Like, go get him minutes somewhere. If he can just start games, he'll get better. But you're talking about a team that's getting their teeth kicked in, week out in a more competitive, I would agree, than MLS Next Pro. I don't know how much higher the level is in the second division of Scotland.
It's going to be it's going to be different atmospheres, right? It's going to be it's going to be there is going to be fans that will be filling the stands there. There will be things that he hasn't encountered, including just waking up someplace that doesn't have the comforts of home and doesn't have his friends around him and stuff like that. And I think that's...
You said sink or swim, and I guess from my perspective, I am very worried he's going to sink. And to know, like, look, it could happen to anybody. You're 18, you get sent to a new country in a not good situation club-wise. Like, I think it's a reasonable concern.
And the Fire have the ability to recall him at any point in time. I think they'll be keeping an eye on how the sinking or swimming is going. It's also through the end of 2026, and we're recording this at the end of August, right? Like, we are talking about 4 months. And I believe that the Scottish League does not, like, they have a few weeks of a Christmas break too, so it's like not, it's even a little bit shorter than it may seem.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder, I mean, we may not get the full details until, certainly don't have them now. Maybe we won't get them at all. I wouldn't be shocked if there's a mutual extension option, right? I mean, if he plays well there and they turn around, and he's not going to be a big part of the plans for the sprint season, which as the contracts lay right now, especially if you're bringing in another center back, it seems that way. Who knows? We'll cross our fingers. We'll hope for the best and wish.
And again, that would also, a lot of that would depend on who the move is and like what their contract situation is as well, right?
Yeah, there's who knows? Could be another Ari Lassiter where he's here for 4 games and then leaves forever, and 2 of them were suspensions. Anyway, yeah, so we'll wish Christopher well. Wish him all the best. If you have any questions about the Scottish League, reach out to Paul McCann. That seems to be his foray, his forte, as it were.
He'll be the bald guy in the supporters section wearing an Andrew Gutman shirt.
Exactly, or a Mike McGee shirt. He is one of those two. But anywho, that's Tim. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's all we've got in terms of big news. Let's talk about the things that happened. I guess technically news. The Fire's win streak ends at 6. The unbeaten streak is extended to 7, though. They sacrifice a late winner or a late equalizer, to Cameron Harper. It's one of those where too many people in the box flat-footed, too many people not tracking a man, and a nice finish from Harper ultimately cost the Fire 2 points and earns 1 back for the Red Bull. Martin Haile Selassie scored the opening goal. It was a beauty. A nice assist from Viktor Radojevic. A game that it felt like we were due in a way. In some ways, it felt like the performances hadn't quite been up to snuff, and it was going to come back to bite you. And something about Michael Bradley, he takes 4 of a possible 6 points off Greg Berhalter in his first year as a head coach. Maybe he just has the number a little bit. But Tim, 30,000 feet. How are you looking down at the draw with?
I mean, look, it was a heavily rotated squad. I think that Greg's focus was obviously on Rayados. He has said consistently, we want to be competitive in every game that we're in. I think that the lineup did compete, but to some extent, depending on how you count, like if you count Joel being on the left and not the right, and if you count Barroso as a starter, like the different ways of maybe quibbling here and there, but 3 of the 4 guys in the back line and the entire midfield, as well as Robin Lod starting in center forward, we're all playing out of position, right? Like that's a majority of the 11 that were either not normally guys that would start. I mean, including Sam Williams in his first MLS minutes, and probably last in 2026. So it is what it is. I think that it says something good that the Fire were able to hang, with that rotated of a lineup against essentially the A team from the Red Bulls. But it wasn't that surprising that the result became what it became. What I think is a little bit worrying is some of the trends that we've seen for the Fire throughout the year did continue, and I think that this is one of the reasons that we talked a lot about this. We don't have to get into it now. I think that the Fire do need to make a move for a midfielder, and I mean, it looks like it's not going to be Leon Goretzka. You're again not going to convince me that's not a positive in a lot of ways, just given some of the issues that he's had in every club that he's been in. But it needs to be somebody, because I think that they need somebody there, especially if Franco is not going to be back in the near future and back at less than 100%.
Yeah, if you're not paying attention to the Twitter of it all, there was an official "here we go" from Fabrizio Romano for Leon Goretzka heading to Aston Villa. As far as I'm aware, that hasn't gone official yet, so who knows. Greg Berhalter did say in press, or to Andrew Wiebe, not in a presser, in post game or pre game before or after the match, I can't remember which. The Fire were close to adding a designated player and simply deciding if they wanted to go that route or the U22 route. There was also news coming from Romania this week. Anzor Mekvabishvili. I was practicing that, and I really thought I was going to get it first try. Who is not an Andre Franco type, who is not a creative player, more box to box with defensive leaning. So it does seem like there's some interest there. There's some the wheels are turning there, Tim, to your point. It's needed. I guess the question is how quickly. We're sitting 8 days away from the transfer window closing, and there doesn't seem to be anything outside of a Georgian midfielder who's been playing in Romania for a few years now.
Yeah, I think the Fire do have domestic moves in the works that would reinforce the midfield, so that would be another change as well. And if it's someone from MLS, right, like they just get on a plane and you see him the next or that day, right?
Sorry, you talk midfield here, and look, we saw it again here. We've seen it pretty consistently, and in some ways, the team has just kind of overcome it on this win streak. Although, I would say Sergio Orhel played a big part in some of those Leagues Cups wins in terms of adding a different dynamic. Tim, I don't want to get too big picture here, right? But does it feel like we've wasted time is maybe the wrong way of saying it, but now, like I said, you're sitting a week out from the transfer window. You have less time to integrate a player. You have less time to actually. I assume they've been scouting in the background. I would be shocked if they hadn't been. But you're talking about less time to integrate a guy when your playoffs start in 2 months, and you're still in contention for worst case the 2 spot in the East. Potentially, if Nashville really starts to falter, you could be in the Supporter Shield race. Like, does it feel like things have maybe slipped by a little bit here, just in terms of the timing?
It's always hard to judge, right? Like something that we've asked for years and years and years was MLS to change the transfer window so it was open later, so that because before it would close while it was still open in Europe, and so guys were like, no, I'm going to the Premier League, even if no Premier League clubs had interest. We saw in the case of Goretzka, they've had since, really 6 months before his contract expired in June. So they've had like 8 months to take a look at Leon Goretzka and make a move, and they didn't do it until the end of August, which says something on their part. But it does happen. You can't have it both ways. If like the window needs to be open later, and now the window's open too late to make a difference for 2026 or whatever season you're talking about, won't be an issue after the schedule change. Honestly, I don't hate it. Like whatever happens, like when you get a guy in, they have limited time, right? And we don't know how long visas would take on some of these guys for international moves. But we saw Andre Franco, come in. He did not play many games. He played about 400 minutes. He did make an impact and was arguably one of the big catalysts that pushed the Fire over that line and made them 8th as opposed to maybe like 10th or something. Maybe the Fire would have gotten there on their own. We never know without Franco. And I think that's what you're looking at here. I just, I can't get too upset about it. Like, I know the Fire have been working on multiple targets. I do think they need to sign someone, and I think they need to be a player they think will make an impact, and not just in 2026. Moves always happen later than I think everyone wishes they would. That's just the nature of the beast. And in terms of where the Fire will finish, right now, people that subscribe to the hotline get our update that has a model that I built about where the Fire are likely to finish. It has them, the confidence level is 2nd through 5th in the East. I'm not 100% sure how much you really care about where that is. Catching Nashville would be very, very difficult. Not mathematically impossible, but difficult. And with all of the teams moving in the table below them, I'm not 100% sure, if you're 3rd place and you end up playing like today, that would be FC Cincinnati, and the Fire move up to 2nd, it would be NYCFC. I think NYCFC would be the harder of those 2 matchups. So you don't really know what difference it'll make. I just can't get too jazzed about that, to be honest. It doesn't.
I think it's more from the perspective of who do you play in the second round, right? If you're the 3 seed and you win, it's Nashville. If you're the 2 seed and you win, it's whoever else, whoever the next highest seed is, right? Miami, could be New England, depending on who win games. I don't know.
Don't count out. I don't know, teams like Orlando City or Toronto or maybe even DC United against Nashville. You never know.
Tim, haven't you heard? Orlando City is one of the best teams in the league. I don't know if you've heard that. That's what I keep hearing. That's what I heard about the Quakes too. Wonder how that's going. Tim, let's talk maybe another negative from Saturday, and then maybe we can talk a little bit of Rayados. Look, it feels a little bit like beating a dead horse, but it does feel like something that needs to be talked about. Not an ideal performance from Jonathan Bamba on a day where Marin Haile looked better. We'll say better. Scored that fantastic goal. Marin's obviously been in good form as well as a guy like Puso. And there's been a lot of outcry, I'll say that, and a lot of rotation at that left wing spot. Just kind of curious your 2 cents and where you stand. I know we've talked it to death, but it feels a little more pressing after the performance Saturday, seeing him back in action.
This becomes one of those things where, depending on how you look at different models, you can, I think by the eye test, I think Bamba had a frustrating performance. There were all the things that were not quite right. It seemed like it's that confidence issue we've talked about. Statistically, in some ways, he was one of the best players on the team for the Fire. Um, he had the most touches in the opposition box, according to Opta. He had the most shots. He had the highest XG on the team. Now, a lot of those XG came from a shot that he had a clear look at net and shot it directly to the goalie who was in the middle of his net, and didn't no diving, no reaching out. And I think that says something about his confidence. But that'll happen to everybody. I do think that it says something that he played 86 minutes in this one. Like we talked about the squad rotation, it says something that I think he was an 86-minute player, and we didn't see Puso until Bamba came off. The other guy that I think maybe not a dead horse, but I think that's worth talking about is Robert Lewandowski, and he had enough time to get pretty involved, and he was not. I don't know that when a striker is not involved, you can put that at their feet, literally or metaphorically, because you're not putting it at their feet. But I think that has also kind of become a talking point.
Yeah, look, maybe instead of going micro, I'll take it macro and say it's very concerning that your two designated players are the two guys we're looking at kind of week after week. Like, I'd love a little bit more. Like, you're doing a lot of good things. I don't want to say you're not good, but you're not doing what I think we're paying you as two of the top 5 or 6. I don't know where Jonathan Bamba lands now after some of the new acquisitions. 2 top 10 designated player salaries, right? And I'm not somebody who likes to talk salaries with designated players because, like, who cares? It hits the cap the same way, but it's not nothing, right? I think I'm trying to find the right way to phrase this. I mean, look, the Bamba side of things, I do think has just been derailed. I think if he can get in the goal, I think he'll be fine. He was fantastic. That stretch of games Hugo Cuyper's missed early in the year. He had the personal issues that took him back to France and hasn't been the same since coming back. I do think once he finds his groove, I think everything could just fall back into place for him. On the Lewandowski side, I am. The more I think about this, the more I am a little more critical of Greg Berhalter's usage of Robert Lewandowski. I don't think this roster build makes any sense for him. Now you're adding this potentially, we talked about Mekbashvili coming over from Romania. It's a guy who loves to play long balls, who can do it really, really well, who can send the ball forward and progress passes really easily and really cleanly. And that doesn't make sense for a guy who's 38 and can't keep up. Like, respectfully, he does not play at the pace required for this system, and it's not helping anyone.
Yeah. So 2 things. One, I think the difference between them is for Bamba, at a certain statistical level, right? Like, he's been playing better. And I think that gets to the confidence thing, and there's no way you can do that. But I think that you're right. Like, it feels like if the dam breaks, he will be doing a lot better very quickly. No guarantee that dam breaks, because I think people have been saying that forever. And I think that's one of the things that when Greg brought him in, like, if you look at what made him such a highly paid player, but both here and in Spain before that, it is all the things that we've talked about, that dribbling ability, that explosive speed, that ability to get in behind. He has not scored goals at a consistently high level, and I think a lot of coaches have looked at what it is Bamba can do, and they think, I can get that guy to shoot at the right time and score goals, because that's just like the last little switch you need to flick. And every coach so far has kind of failed at it, which is why he's a $5.5 million player in Chicago and not like a guy playing for a team in Europe that's competing for the Champions League and making 3 times that.
It does feel also like he's probably being hurt by no number 10 next to him. I do think he'd be better if he had a more creative outlet inside.
And that's the connection between him and Robert Lewandowski. The difference between him and Robert Lewandowski is, I think, Bamba, you mentioned Marin. Like, Marin can go, he's looked good in that position. He's, scored that goal playing out of a deeper position in the midfield. So we've talked about his versatility. So Marin is a guy that is clicking, that can go there. Pusu is a guy that is clicking, that can go there. Zink can play on the left as well. So, like, you've got plenty of different options you can play in for Bamba. Right now, I mean, Robin Lod is the backup striker for Robert Lewandowski because Jason Chocolat can't make it to a first-team matchday sheet. And so you don't have that backup. So, like, it's okay if Bamba's not really performing, or the stuff that he does, if the Fire had come up, say, 2-0 on some team, and Bamba was on the bench, I think the stuff that he does that challenges defenses can work really well at helping maintain offensive pressure while doing the kinds of stuff that is not going to risk that lead, although he did have a bad giveaway in this one, so it's never perfect. Like, the issue with Robert Lewandowski is that he has not been getting enough service, and that goes back to the 10. And I'm not sure that that's really on him. But like he was out there for just about a half an hour once you include stoppage time. 11 total touches on the ball in about 30 minutes, which is not enough. And I think 0 were in the opposition box. Like that, Robert Lewandowski is going to need touches in the opposition box if you want him to do Robert Lewandowski things.
Yeah, and I think just to be as clear as I can, like the point here is not Robert Lewandowski is lacking in some way. It's that you're not playing the proper system around him. You don't. He is not somebody who at this point, and maybe it's the direction he's being given. It may not. It may be 0% his fault. At this point, he doesn't seem to be somebody who fits into a fast transition attack. And that's what the Fire do a lot of the time. They want to move the ball quickly down the field, take advantage of overloads and free spaces in the attacking third to score in transition. When they have... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I just mean to say when they have played a more possession-based offense in the final third, he is involved, and he does look good, and he can be dangerous. It feels like a lot of the scoring opportunities, we'll say recently at least, have come from those more transition periods, and it feels like consistently he's not involved in those.
So the Fire did try to do more of that build-up play early on in like the first 20, 25 minutes of this one, and it wasn't working because the Red Bull were able to get bodies on, press too quickly and just clog the midfield with space, and especially with it being essentially three midfielders that don't normally start there. And Marin Haile Selassie is the only guy that is a frequent player this year for the first team. They just weren't able to play through that. And that gets to the issue of not having a number 10. And so the adjustment after that was to start playing long balls. And I think that's, not long after that's when Marin's goal happened. I don't think that's coincidental. And so it was the Red Bulls again. Like Michael Bradley is a very smart coach. I think that he's got limited tools. He played a system that really exploited the Fire's weaknesses very effectively. Now, I'm not sure that there was a solution around that, but I think if Andre Franco was healthy and at 100% that ACL injury never happened, I think this is a very different game, and I think a lot of the Fire's other games would have been very different. Well, maybe this game wouldn't have been different because maybe Andre Franco would have been on the bench the whole time because saving for Rayados, but you get the point.
Well, even if Sergio Orahel is healthy, right? If you have Sergio Orahel in that game instead of Sam Williams, and I didn't think Sam Williams was like bad by any stretch.
I thought Sam Williams actually had a pretty decent outage.
But they offer different things, I should say.
Yeah,
right?
They do offer very different things. My overall takeaway from Sam Williams is this guy's too good to be playing for the Colorado Switchbacks for much longer. And again, it's a challenge because there is a very big gap between the lower divisions in this country and MLS, and I don't know what you do for guys that you don't feel confident can be good enough to be regular contributors at the top level and are young and need minutes. So he's kind of in that gap. If he didn't
have four other guys that play his position better than he does at his spot, he'd probably be a more consistent. Like if he didn't have Mauricio Pineda, he'd probably be on the roster, right? To me, he's an MLS player. We can make a pretty reasonable argument about where he fits into a roster, right? But I
think if the Fire didn't have Mauricio Pineda, they would have gone and gotten another domestic midfielder to do Mauricio Pineda type things. But I don't know.
Fair enough. But I think there's also, that becomes a question of what level of team is he playing on inside of this league, and is it a top 5 team? Maybe not. Is it a Sporting Kansas City? Absolutely. And then you just find somewhere in the middle that we agree.
We're now saying Sporting Kansas City as an MLS roster. Okay. All right. I see what you're doing.
Okay. Columbus Crew, now second to last in MLS, if anybody was keeping track.
Man, and they played Nashville so well. They were leading 2-1 late. It looked like they had it in the bag, but then Nashville did Nashville things and ended up with all 3 points, which is just rough going for Columbus because they need something to go right.
They do. Hey, let's talk about Monterrey. Let's talk about the return of Hugo Cuypers this Tuesday at SeatGeek Stadium. CF Monterrey and Hugo Cuypers enter to try and advance to the semifinals after Chicago Fire gifted them a quarterfinals appearance with their win over Cruz Azul. It's the quarterfinals of Leagues Cup. It is maybe the biggest, outside of the playoffs, I would say probably the biggest game in the last 5 years for the Fire. Arguably bigger in some ways, right? With CONCACAF Champions Cup qualifying on the line. Like, this is a pretty big moment for a club that hasn't had a lot of big moments in recent memory.
Yeah, and I think here's the other argument. It's the quarterfinals of a competition and it's a single elimination. The quarterfinals in MLS playoffs are a best of three series. The Fire dropped the first one. So like you could make an argument that this is the biggest singular game that the Fire have been in. Depending on how important you think the wild card was, I mean it becomes academic. They are closer though to that CONCACAF Champions Cup berth than they have been in since the modern editions of the tournament have existed.
Yeah, 2007, right, was the last
Yeah.
time after the Open Cup win in 06.
And at that point, it was a very different tournament. It felt a lot more in some ways like the Leagues Cup, with like a lot of games getting played in the United States all the time, and you know it wasn't as important of a championship to anyone in League MX or anywhere else. And so that's why if you look in some of the kind of surprising champions of those earlier iterations of it, that's where that came from. So yeah, I mean it's a big big opportunity. And I mean, you could not set up the storylines for this any better, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, look, it's almost too perfect to be real life, right? Not only did we wrote about it in the hotline this morning, but not only did Monterrey need a last minute equal winner from Hugo Cuypers, nonetheless, to advance. They also needed the Fire to win against Cruz Azul. Puso Di Tejan scores his now famous goal that advanced the Fire through as the top team in the tournament. And now you welcome back the still team leader in goals, and top 5 in MLS in goals, Hugo Cuypers, back to face off against the guy who's wearing the shirt that he maybe feels like should be his. Tough to say. It does feel like, Tim, I look, we talked about it in the preview. I think we both expected heavy rotation in the game against Red Bull. I did breathe a small sigh of relief when I saw that Greg actually rotated for that game, just because I was having flashbacks to all the Open Cup rosters that he tried to, kind of half and half his way through. Monterrey, obviously a power of Mexico, but I wouldn't say they're at the peak of their powers at the moment. This feels like a game. It is a game the Fire are favored in if you look at the sports books, and it feels like a game they can and should win with, well, home turf, maybe not a home crowd. We'll see.
So here's, man, this can be sliced so many different directions. Technically speaking, it is not a Chicago Fire home game according to the Leagues Cup tournament. It is because of the seeding from before the tournament. So even though the Fire finished in the number 1 seed and Monterrey finished in the number 4 seed, it is technically Monterrey's home game. The only difference, by the way, so was the Cruz Azul game. Only difference in that one, when you're given lineup sheets before the game in the press box, goalkeepers were indicated. It was mostly in English, but goalkeepers were indicated with a P for portero instead of a G for goalkeeper. I don't know. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, that really makes it. But it did feel very much like Estadio SeatGeek against Cruz Azul.
And look, anecdotal evidence here. Sorry, and I'll let you finish. I live in Berwyn, okay? I think I've said that before. I've seen a lot of Monterrey jerseys in the last 2 days. Like more than I've ever seen in this neighborhood. I knew they were here, but it's like, it's crazy. It's crazy. They're out and about.
So here's the other thing about that. The Fire had a lengthy pre-sale for season ticket holders before the tickets went generally on sale, and it looked like the majority of the available seats were snatched up from, reports that I got. And, this is not talking to team sources on this. This is from other places, to be clear. So the other games, right, like Cruz Azul, like I think the Leagues Cup group stage is always a little bit of a harder sale in some ways because it's sold months in advance. And if you're a Fire fan, I think, a lot of MLS fans don't care as much about the tournament. The fact that it's at SeatGeek makes it a little bit significantly less of a draw for some people, to an impossibility for some, transit-dependent people to make it there. And so it just makes it a harder pitch. Like that plus midweek for a lot of the games, it's hard. This being a knockout game, Hugo Cuyper's reunion, all of those things, it may have sold a little bit better, but I think it'll be interesting. I haven't checked on this yet, but to see what tickets are available for resale and how they're getting snatched up and what prices are like, because I do wonder if the season ticket holder pre-sale ends up becoming a CF Monterrey buying secondhand, like fans buying secondhand sale.
I will say I think there was a concerted effort, it felt like, from fans to make sure this game was not the Cruz Azul game. Looking at, I just pulled up the tickets at the moment. Let's just make it 2. I mean, get-in price right now is around $30. $32 it looks like in the get-in price, $40 for the supporter section, $80 around midfield. Like, it doesn't, I mean, we're talking resale here, of course. There's a fair amount of tickets available. This is not, I don't know. We'll see how that translates, but I'm just giving some context as you mentioned ticket prices. Tim, I lost your audio there, buddy.
Sorry. To be clear, that's like lower than what you're seeing for the Cruz Azul, and
yeah.
And like that was on sale for months, and so people had a lot of time to plan on it. And like if you were, one of the things we saw from a lot of these games in the Leagues Cup over the years is that like it wasn't just Chicago Cruz Azul fans. It was like if you can get you and your friends or your family into a vehicle and drive to SeatGeek at a reasonable time, even if you got to take some time off work, like people would make that drive from 6 hours away, from 8 hours. Like I talked to somebody that drove up from Houston for that game against Cruz Azul. Well, you know, which says something about the team's drawing power, but like at that point you're like, I mean, it's closer to drive from Houston to Chicago than it is Houston to Mexico City, but like at some point you're like, this math is getting pretty close. So I think we'll see. I mean, I do think it is fair for the Fire players and stuff to be expecting more of a home crowd than they've seen. At the same time, I think these midweek games are always going to be a challenge. And the way that MLS, we talked about this before, shot themselves in the foot by making it seem like it was Leagues Cup versus US Open Cup to some of the most diehard supporters, made it a real challenge. But hey, Monterrey is going to be the toughest test. And like you say that they may not be at the peak of their powers. Look, they did just lose 2-0 to Lyon in Liga MX, but their game before that, they beat Inter Miami, and that's the win that with the late Hugo Cuyper's goal that set them up for making it here. So, like, they're a good team, right?
Yeah, 100%. No, I mean, look, they are. Look, I think there's.
Sorry, they beat Miami first. It was the who was the third game in that group stage? I'm trying to remember. They beat Nashville. Yeah, it was Nashville. So like they beat Miami and Nashville to get here. Like the two top teams in the East are the teams they had to beat to make it here.
Yeah, and look, the other side of the coin, I mean, we can kind of talk about how realistically the Leagues Cup tables kind of represent the leagues themselves in terms of who's the best, who's the worst. I don't think it's unreasonable to say Monterrey is one of the 4 best teams in Mexico. And I do think there was actually, I'm looking at the roster now because I couldn't remember off the top of my head. Diego Rossi and Hugo Cuyper both played the full match, right? And they've both kind of worked as subs and starters at different times for Monterrey, but they both played the full match against Leon. So nothing there. Wonder if we'll see Hugo Cuyper get the start.
And that is a question. Now, I mean, they do have a lot of other talent around them, right? Like, Jesus Corona is on that squad for, Tecatito for, fans of Liga MX or the Mexican national team.
Luka
Orano, like who came over from MLS, and like a number of really just talented players up and down the roster. I mean, like Victor Guzman, I think has been playing pretty well for them. It's a good squad. They did not finish where they expect to, but just with the stature of the club and the spend of that roster, like they are one of the teams that can really spend. They expect to be making it very far in every tournament they enter.
100%. Tim, I know it's a weird midday recording, so I feel like this might be a good time to wrap up unless you have other specific notes on Fire versus Monterrey.
Just, it'll be interesting to see who starts for Monterrey because like you noted, they did play a lot of regular starters, including Hugo Cuyper, who went the full 90 against Lyon in what was a 2-0 loss after I think Lyon went down a man early and they still couldn't find the back of the nets. Like that wasn't great, but I think Matias Almeida, who's been coaching the team for I think just a few months, I think he came in May, you're seeing them play not dissimilarly to a lot of like the Greg teams. If it's like a base 4-2-3-1 that kind of morphs into a 4-3-3 and kind of defends in a 4-4-2, can be patient in progression with having one of the midfielders drop back. And then they like to sort of like control the middle of the pitch with triangles in the midfield and then to channel opposing attacks out wide. Now that happens to be the Fire's strength this year, so we'll see how that strategy may adjust or change. And the only other thing, just the game against Lyon, that the most recent game for Monterrey was on Friday. And so and it was it was away. So they had to travel back to Monterrey. But they do have an extra day of rest compared to the Fire.
They also had, I don't know if you saw this, they had airplane issues. So they were supposed to travel to Chicago yesterday, Sunday. They did travel today, as far as I'm aware. I haven't seen an update that says they didn't.
They are there. Yeah, they're there.
Yeah,
we did not get an update on when they will be training and when the press conferences and stuff like that are happening until very late because of those logistical issues. It seems like it's been a real nightmare of a tournament logistically for a number of teams. But hey, Fire can use every advantage they've got. Although the question is, how are Monterrey going to perform at the altitude of Mount Bridgeview?
It's not often.
I don't know what the heck they've got in the background of their stadium, but Mount Bridgeview is majestic. It's the two of the best, most beautiful vistas outside of a stadium in the world. CF Monterrey and SeatGeek and Bridgeview.
Tim, it is not often, okay, that one gets to play at a cathedral of the sport of soccer. Okay. But on Tuesday night, Monterrey will be blessed with the opportunity to play at SeatGeek Stadium. Okay.
If that's the cathedral, like you understand how heretics happen.
There are cathedrals everywhere for those with eyes to see them, Tim. That's what I would tell you. The only thing I've thought of here as we're wrapping up, I don't love the idea of the star number 9 for the other team, or number 99, I suppose, knowing exactly how the SeatGeek turf plays. I would have liked him to not know, but Hugo Cuyper's not exactly unfamiliar with how to play soccer at SeatGeek Stadium. So,
although from what I've been hearing, it looks like the turf at SeatGeek is getting worse, so that's another X factor.
That's possible.
Yeah. I'll just say all the rain and then everything that's happened since then has not really done much to improve the caliber of that pitch. And the part of the reason to say that is injuries do become a concern, for both teams, and you hope that doesn't happen.
100%. Tim, before we go, let's do the question. So here we go. Who's your spark? Who you got? And who you got?
Man, the temptation is to say Puso in some ways, but I'm gonna say Philip Zinkernagel. He's got an opportunity to show up against his former teammate and how many goals that they connect on last year. I think that could be big, and he's been a little quiet. And like I said, with the way that Rayados are going to try to channel the Fire's attack wide, like we've seen how well Zink can operate in those spaces. It's going to be a tough match. It's hard to predict a Fire win, but I think that they do have some headwinds in terms of they also know exactly how Hugo Cuyper likes playing and how he likes to move in spaces. They've got familiarity with Diego Rossi and a number of the other players there. So I think that they do have those advantages. Plus the travel delays for Rayados, are going to make it difficult, and they're not really going to get to see the pitch or anything else until just before the match. So I'm going to say 2-1 Fire.
Yeah. I probably got... I always hesitate to pick the Fire winning because it feels like every time I do, they lose. I could see it 2-1 Fire strictly because I think Hugo Cuyper scores in this game. I just don't see how he doesn't, In terms of spark, I'm going to go... I'm going back and forth, and I don't want to be the guy who picks 2, but my main one is going to be Jay Davila because I think you need somebody who can kind of handle one of these guys, right? If you've got Diego Rossi, Hugo Cuyper, Lugo Orejano, potentially all on the field at the same time, you need somebody who can handle at least one of them to just shut them out of the game. You need somebody with the athleticism, the physical ability to shut down a guy like Hugo Cuyper's, and I think Jay can do that, right? The other one I would say is Robert Lewandowski, strictly because this is not a big back line for Monterrey. I think the tallest is Victor Guzman, who's 6 foot. You can get the ball in the air, if you can put in good crosses and Robert Lewandowski can finish one off with his head, I think that'll be a pretty effective way to get the ball into the box. We'll see, obviously, how that turns out. It's not exactly a strength of all the people around Robert Lewandowski. But if that's an option, I think that would be a pretty strong benefit. So I'm going to say Jay Davila, but I'd keep an eye on Big Bob to get one in the back of the net on Tuesday night, too. Tim, anything else before we wrap?
I think we're good.
Love it. Thanks so much for being here. We're going to shorten this one a little bit. So go to meninred97.com. There you can subscribe to the hotline. It's our weekly newsletter. Comes out Monday mornings. So go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any more issues, episodes, however you want to phrase it. Wherever you're listening, give us a like, a subscribe, a rate, all that good stuff. And make sure you're following on all the social medias at meninred97 anywhere and everywhere. And last but not least, for Tim, for our illustrious producer, Austin, thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire. Come on, you Men in Red.